Hello, a very warm welcome to all our friends, viewers, stakeholders, fans of Africa Rise with Susan West. It is a very hot, very hot Sunday here in London. Yep. And as you join the stream, as usual, share, invite your friends, send in your questions and comments if you have any. Yeah, so today we're just going to be chatting about matters arising, because there is a meeting, okay, just a couple of days ago, a meeting started in France, and I was super impressed by some African leaders who attended, and they made us feel so proud. People like President Ramaphosa of South Africa and Ruto of Kenya. They spoke so eloquently that I cannot help but bring this up here so we can just chat about it. So remember, you can type your comments down there in the comment section. Share. If you haven't followed, like, or subscribe to all our channels, please do so. It's Africa Rise TV on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And our guest, well, he's like family now. Starman Alpha is going to be here chatting with us on this topic. But in the meantime, I'm just going to quickly play the video, a clip of President Ramaphosa at the meeting.
Us is a bit of a negative. You will have heard President Sisi talking about the 100 billion that was promised in Paris. President Sassou Nguesso yesterday as well also spoke about it at the dinner. Now, there is that issue that a number of the commitments that have been made have not really been fully lived up to. But before I get into details, let me immediately say that we recognize the many initiatives that have been put on the table, and a number of countries here have done so. Germany has gone out of the way to put a number of initiatives, and the US has also done a number of things. But there have been times when we felt like we were beggars. I played a key role as chair of the African Union during the COVID period. We felt like we were beggars when it came to vaccines availability. When we felt we needed access to vaccines, and the northern hemisphere countries had bought all the vaccines in the world, and they were hogging them. And they didn't want to release them at the time when we need it the most. And we felt like we were begging. And at times it felt like there would just be droppings from the table that yes, we will give you that and that. And let me tell you something that generated a lot of resentment. We resented that, and it got worse when we said we want to manufacture our own vaccines. And when we went to the WTO, there was a lot of resistance, enormous resistance. And we kept saying, what is more important, life or profits by your big pharmaceutical companies? And that too, I must tell you now, generated and deepened that disappointment and resentment on our part, because we felt like life in the Northern Hemisphere is much more important. Than life in the global south. And these are issues that need to be addressed, and I'm glad that we are all seated here like this, because we've got to get to the heart of these matters. And address them. Now I come to promises that have been made. And Chancellor Schulz,
I do apologize for this technical glitch. I'm not sure why, because I didn't have a problem when I previewed this video. However, it's disappointing because this should
was
set the
saying,
premise.
Scholz was saying, we've got to
Oh, it should set the premise on the conversation we're supposed to be having today. So I'm trying to stick with it, but it looks like I might have to cut out this video. But I really wanted, for those of you who don't know or haven't heard or haven't seen this video, to really understand why I'm so super proud of President Ramaphosa and President Ruto of Kenya. You know, they stood up, they spoke so eloquently, and they really went there with the African agenda on the table, literally tabling and letting the West understand that we are not beggars. We haven't that they haven't come.
walk the talk. Yes, we want to see that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna bring Starman Alpha on screen and see if I'm just hoping that he's also seen this video before, and so that we can make a good we can have a good conversation and analyze, you know, all of the speeches from the African leaders who actually spoke. Some of them were there. I'm not sure if we missed anything that they said, but some of them were just not. They were there, but they just wasn't there. But of course, it is.
The talk being walked. President Sassou.
All right, I'm just gonna bring Starman Alpha. It is sad that I can't play this video to the end, but let me bring.
Wesu yesterday said at the dinner,
Okay, let's see. Starman, are you there? Let me do this. Starman, are you there? Where is. Okay. No, no. What's happening? Oh, yeah, I can see you. So sorry. Okay. What is happening today?
Hi.
Starman, I am not happy at all because the video that should have set the premise to our conversation, the videos, I can't play them anymore because there is a lag, and
Right.
it's been going on for over 20 minutes. You know, they're not very long videos, they're like 7 minutes, and the next one is about 5 minutes. However, I'm unable to play it because we spent over 30 minutes trying to listen to a 7 minutes video. So but I do hope that some of the viewers would have seen the, you know, the comments, the speeches made by African leaders in France just a couple of days ago, so they can contribute to it. But whatever it is, I am super proud. You know, Starman, I listened to President Ramaphosa and Ruto of Kenya, and I felt proud. Why? Because regardless of the challenges that we face as Africans, the fact that they listen, you know, Starman, these people listen, the politicians listen. Because you know all the noise we made on social media during when the lockdown up until now, they begin to sound like us. When they're in all these big stages talking to world, as part of the, international or global leaders meeting, they begin to sound like us, the ordinary African people. I'm not sure if did you see the video? Did you listen to Ramaphosa's speech?
No. The particular video you're talking about, I haven't seen it.
Right. So, in a nutshell, He literally schooled the EU and all the other foreign leaders there. And he made a case for Africa. He cited some other African leaders who had spoken before him. And then he went ahead to talk about the monies that was promised to Africa for, is it climate change?
Right.
Yeah. And this was like in
The new
2021.
Green Deal.
Yeah, in 2021, they made all these bogus promises. They never kept, not even a cent, not a dollar has been released to African nations. And we contribute the least to, the pollution and, global warming so the fact that President Ramaphosa stood there, he didn't even look at a some kind of a prompt or a book, or he was just, when someone comes prepared, he just spoke to them and spoke the heart. And then he talked about going to Ukraine and Russia to speak to them. And the position the African leaders, the African entourage had nothing to do with begging, because these Europeans seem to have it in their mind that every time Africa comes is about begging. So when President Ramaphosa said, I think he was occupying the position of the chairman of the AU at the time,
Mm.
so they went to say to open up the shipping routes so that all of those grains can begin to flow to the rest of the world. And he did mention something like is it Ukraine and Russia, or both, either of them, talking about donations to Africa. Give they would like to give, they'll give. And he was like, no, we're not here for favors. We're not here to beg. We're just saying open up the shipping ports, allow these things to flow so that the rest of the world can have access to these foods. And then um when he went ahead to talk about it's not all about coming here and talking and talking and talking and all of the empty promises they made to Africa and they've never ever redeemed. And then we talked going to Ruto. It's a shame that I couldn't play the video myself to refresh my memory of what it was about. But President Ruto, I was so impressed. He was sitting, I think there was a separate, there was a cutout room where they had a particular session, and President Ruto literally schooled Emmanuel Macron of France.
Mm.
He literally was asking, like when you feel like they know what they're talking about. It's not one of those things where they've written a long speech for them and they
Mm.
just come and read the speech. They don't even understand it, probably don't even understand the content of the speech, because they can't even give a there can be a back and forth, when it comes to questions and an intelligent conversation held. But President Ruto sat there and he asked some salient questions to Macron. And the fact that he understood his position as a president of Kenya, he didn't go
Mm.
there with his tails between his legs. That attitude is something that I went to bed feeling so good. And I couldn't wait to come here and talk about it. And,
Okay. I mean, that particular video, I haven't seen it, but it's on my watch list.
hmm.
And I see a lot of spring in the step of. I mean, I don't like to call them African leaders. I have my own view of them. And yeah, it's good that they are speaking up for themselves now. But the big question is ultimately, how does that trickle down to the ordinary African? You know, is it just a case of I mean this a lot of these leaders are corrupt anyways. So is it just a case of, leaving one dealer and now buying from another dealer? You
And by
know,
dealer, you mean?
well, the US or G7. Because you see how all of them are all.
Oh, what's happening today? Starman has dropped. Something is not right.
Sorry?
Yeah, you just went off. I'm not sure why.
Oh, can you see me now?
Yes, yes, you're back on. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was saying that I'm for BRICS. And if you ask me, is better. BRICS is better for any so-called underdeveloped nations. You know, I say it how I see it. I don't bite my tongue. I don't hide my mouth. I'm gonna come out and say exactly how I see it. Um, I'm trying to decide where to start from. Should I start from our so-called African leaders, or should I start from the current situation the African continent is in?
But you have to give credit to where it's due. There's always going to be a starting point. I mean, it took so many years for African nations to find themselves at a place where we find ourselves to be at, almost as though we're always begging for things that even belong to us.
Hmm.
And someone else sitting somewhere else in a foreign country seems to be pulling the strings that, that make this music sound on the African continent, regardless of the country you're talking about, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's Mali, whether it's
Hmm.
South Africa, anywhere else on the African continent. It doesn't look like we're the ones, dictating the tune or playing the piper. Do you understand? But you
Yeah,
have to give credit to where it's due, which is,
I, yes, and I'll give credit to Ramaphosa of all the African leaders, him for getting South Africa involved in the BRICS and taking the level of initiative he's taking, especially him and that South African finance minister, Naledi Pandor. That woman is a very smart woman, very, very smart woman. I give credit there, but uh, for the Congo president, I saw his own speech. Yeah, you know, it was a good speech. He hit the nail on the head, and our so-called African, this is why I said I have my own view. Them coming out now, to come and start saying this, meaning that they knew all along.
yeah, maybe they knew all along, but they didn't have the courage until we, the people, started speaking, especially speaking on all our different platforms and letting them know. So the point I'm trying to make is moving forward. They started talking. They started looking like they are a people who are there for the sake of their own people and not for their puppet masters.
Mm.
Okay. So moving forward, with the statements or the speeches made by Ramaphosa and Ruto, would should we not celebrate to even praise them to the point where other leaders from other countries who are shying away from making their stands on certain issues
Yes,
have the
yes,
audacity to do so?
yes. Like I said, two of them credit due. But we I guess, because I see them, that whole concept of African leaders, and I tend to put them all in one basket. So yes, more of them need to stand up and make a proper stance, and speak up. But the problem is, a lot of them are Western puppets, so we have to be careful as well who's speaking, why they are speaking, and in whose interests ultimately. There are some current African leaders that, if they start saying stuff like that, I'll look at them very dubiously.
Let me tell you, one of the things I remember Ramaphosa talking about was the fact that he talked about the resentment African nations hold against the West right now. And he
Yes.
said that that resentment stems from even not even he wasn't even making reference to anything before, but other than the fact that the way the West displayed how they considered Africa during the lockdown period, during the time where they started manufacturing vaccines and releasing the vaccines,
Yeah.
how they were hoarding, that the Western nations bought in excess and was hoarding and would not give to Africa. And then when it got to the point where even African nations pleaded and pleaded and pleaded, and then went on to say, okay, now allow us to produce our own vaccines, they still met, like brick walls. So
Yes.
these things was a major factor in the sort of resentment that the President Ramaphosa was talking about from African nations. I do know that there's so many other more anger that African people hold against, the West, simply because we know that most of the problems that we have on our in our different countries is something that is puppeteered from the West. Do you
Yeah,
understand? Like,
yeah.
I'll give an example. I was so worried when I saw President Tinubu of Nigeria landed in France. If you see the warm welcome he was given by Macron and his wife, you could tell that these are friends. This is not just, and the sort of warm welcome and hugs. And I just said, oh my God, Nigeria is done. Because what makes Macron smile and so happy to receive Tinubu do you understand, there were other African country leaders that came, but there was a special welcome that was felt when they saw Tinubu. And of course,
Mhm.
even before he was inaugurated, he visited France a lot. And I just thought, how, even if the other countries like South Africa and Kenya and their likes are standing up, if we are all not on one page, how are we going to forge ahead, as far as not allowing countries like France continue to manipulate and control our economy and how we prosper or not prosper?
You see, this is why I said we shouldn't suddenly now generalize praising all African leaders. I mean, some of them are still hardened criminals, some of the most corrupt characters ever. You know, the fact that they're speaking up now. Let me tell you something. Yeah, to me, there are no African leaders. All we have are warrant chiefs, warrant chief presidents. That's all we have.
But you can't
Because,
generalize for every single African country. You
sorry,
cannot generalize. You can't say that for every single country on the African continent, because there are some of them that have made themselves distinct in the way they think, the way they sound, the way they project.
well, the reason I'm saying this is because you know my stance on this. Those countries are not even African countries, those are European created countries. And then we see the selection process for most of these presidents. They have to go do some musical chairs for the West. So even the last election that brought Tinubu to power, you saw how Tinubu, Atiku, Obi, all of them went to London, to Chatham House, to go do musical chairs for the ex-colonizer. But why do you think all that cozying up? That's just, oh, remember your friends. When he went to France, that's remember your friends. So we must not put all these leaders in one basket just because one or two is speaking up.
And I
And we,
didn't.
and we must give them time as well, because we all know what happens when African leaders begin to speak up. Remember the last one, Mogafili. Healthy,
Hopefully.
middle-aged man, just suddenly, boom. And then now everything he instituted has been reversed. So, yes, like I said, credit to Ramaphosa. It seems like he's doing this. I mean, the fact that he's one of the foundational members of BRICS, I think he gets it. And in a way, South Africa's colonial problems are kind of different from the rest of tropical Africa. So, but Ramaphosa gets it. The Kenyan president, I'm still watching him. And look, we have a lot of these African presidents that come out, say what they know we Africans want to hear. Don't think these presidents are stupid. I don't think they don't recognize that they're always between a rock and a hard place, between us and the West. That's why I call them warrant chief presidents. They know what we want to hear too. As sometimes Kigami. Every time Kigami will come out, you look at Kigami, the West this, the West that. But Kigami is doing internal imperialism against his fellow African brothers, destabilizing Eastern Congo, robbing their resources. But to gain support from us, the Africans, France this, France that. And then we think he's fighting. To the point where I heard an African American telling some of us Africans, that uh, uh, we should all do it. We should that some that they believe the only way to free Africa is for one African state to rise up, conquer and imperialize their fellow African states, and then become some sort of empire. That's the only way to fight back. And he ended by saying like Rwanda, and I was like, what?
No, that's not a smart one. No, that person is
So
not.
so
I'm not going to reference people who sound like they don't even know what they're talking about.
right, but he's not the only one I've heard such rhetoric from. There are a lot of people that make out like Rwanda is this shining model of the African
From
continent.
the outside, it does look like a shining model, but of course, I do understand
Right.
the intricacies and the complicated sides and thoughts that people, everybody you speak to, seem to have something a little bit different from what we are seeing from the outside as far as how well Kigami is doing. And
Mm.
the people from there themselves, seem to have, a lot of them seem to have a different, but I feel like there is not one single African, there is not one single person, not just African, who can please everybody. Okay, you cannot do everything right, first of all, and even if you did, there are some people who just will not like some of the outcomes or some of the changes. Okay, so we have that, bearing that in mind. But overall, if you have to have a look at you know strides and improving the lives of the citizenry, how would you then score, for instance, people like Kagami? you know from looking from the outside, I would say he's done very well for his people.
Yes, but not for his fellow African brothers. And that country, Congo, that he's destabilizing. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. There are two countries in Africa that until you stabilize those two countries, there will never be stability on the African continent. Nigeria and Congo. These two countries are the densest populated part of the Black world, from South America, Caribbean to Papua New Guinea. You cannot find a denser concentration of Black people like these two countries, especially Nigeria. And then Congo, the second, well, arguably the first or the second richest resource richest country on the planet. And Kigami is being used to destabilize one of these countries. So that this, you see, this is why. See,
Mm.
remember the last election when there was this whole euphoria about Obi? I came out and told you, look, I grew up hearing Igbo man can never be president. And they displayed it in the crudest fashion, you know. So I'm not one that, I don't know, maybe a lot of our people.
All right, not to
uh,
cut you in, not to cut in, but also, yesterday, 2 days ago, there was this fear that there was going to be an uprising and civil war might be a possibility in Russia because of the mercenary leader, the Wagner
mm,
group guy, who had turned against Putin, and Putin seemed to have been the one that practically made him who he is.
mm,
So then there was a turn back,
yeah.
in a shortest period of time, where a lot of people, especially in the West, must have been looking forward to something else other than what then happened. As far as the guy saying, we're going to turn back, we're not heading towards Moscow anymore because we're going to avoid bloodshed and all those kind of things. Then I started hearing things about, even in Mali, this Wagner group are operating in Mali. And I couldn't help but wonder, I want to find out, how does that play out? How does it? I'm not sure if you know anything about what has happened in Mali, and all the disruptions that have happened in Mali. I would have imagined that if the Wagner people, the mercenaries, have been used in Mali, to what effect? Because they are not from Western Europe, so
Mm,
they are not allies of Western Europe. So, to whose gain is it? that they are in Mali and even operating whatever it is, criminal, whatever that they are doing there. This is something that's really intriguing. I'd like to learn because a lot of people have been saying the reason why people are sentimental in how they support Russia from on the African continent is the fact that Russia has never invaded any African nations. Russia has never, enslaved any African nations. Russia, they make this case.
Mm.
So it's interesting for me to learn that these Wagner group of people who are an arm of,
Of the
was an
Russian state.
extension of the Russian army to
Yeah.
a great extent. What are they doing in Mali?
Now, Russia is not going to, whether directly or indirectly, as the Russian army or Wagner group, Russia is not going to send Russians to go put their lives on the line and possibly die for nothing, or just because, oh, we love these black people, they're over there. No, of course, Russia wants certain resources, but for when people say there's no history of Russia colonizing Africa, yes, that is true. And that was because, number one, Russia is a very resource rich, well, maybe not number one, that was because when the so-called Europeans, Western Europeans, were carving up Africa, the Americans had declared the Monroe Doctrine, banning them from colonial activities in the Western Hemisphere in 1823,
Banning who? Russia,
banning the Europeans, the
the
Western
Europeans.
Europeans, from the Americas, North and South. Yeah. Okay, the history of colonialism and Russia's part in it. So in 1823, the Americans declared the Monroe Doctrine, banning all Western European colonizers, the Dutch, French, Spanish, Portuguese, British, all of them, banning
Hmm.
them from any further colonial activities in the Western Hemisphere. That's North and South America.
Mm.
So that was why their focus now shifted to Southeast Asia and Africa. Now, they colonized China, a different degree of colonialism, not as extreme as what eventually happened to Africa. Because another mistake our people tend to make is think that, oh, they colonized China. Look at them today. They colonized us. Why can't no? The way they colonized China wasn't quite as extreme as the way they colonized us. That's why Chinese today don't speak German, Spanish, English, or French.
They keep their
That's why
language.
China doesn't exist as 20 or 40 different countries, you know, and practicing Christianity or Islam. So they colonized China, but they didn't quite carve it up. The Americans, for some reason, intervened and stopped the Europeans. Then, when it came to Africa, they had already, from slavery links, they built all of their forts by the coast. So the Americans couldn't quite stop them. But the Americans were observers at the Berlin Conference. The Russians were observers too at the Berlin Conference. Now, the Americans didn't get involved in taking a share of the any African colonies. Eventually, yeah, eventually they took Liberia, but because they were still under this, oh, we're the land of the free. We're not an empire. They were still fooling themselves, even though America is now the first global empire. They were still lying to themselves. Oh, we're not an empire. So they didn't take any shares from that, any cut from that, apart from Liberia eventually. The Russians were just there as observers. They didn't get any cut. They didn't even try and get any cut. Eventually, some Russian on his own tried to, get an African colony, but his attempt failed. That's one. Now, two, to colonize Africa from where Russia is would have been a logistical nightmare for them.
Mm.
Because remember, this was before they had access to, well, Russia, most of their seaports are in the north. And then the only seaports they have access to warm ocean waters is from Crimea. That's one of the reasons they are fighting over Crimea today. It's from Crimea, and then they have a second one in Syria. That's why Russia fought for Syria as well, because the Americans were trying to take Russia in that the wars America instigated in Syria and Ukraine where one of the reasons were to take those two ports away from Russia and cripple them to just having Arctic seaports, which would be very crippling. And then three, Russia is very resource rich. Now, Russia is, I think, either first or second most resource rich country on the planet. And then also something I missed: why Russia also didn't engage in colonizing Africa, and also America. Why America actually didn't engage in? It's not as if America had their hands clean, or Russia themselves. They both they did they were already engaged in their own internal colonization of the indigenous peoples. They were already busy with that, so they couldn't split their forces into two. Colonizing the Americans were colonizing West. Remember when all those Wild West, when they were driving the Indians into reservations, that was happening while Europeans were colonizing Africa.
Right.
And likewise, remember when Ivan the Terrible sent Russians to the east to go and conquer Siberia because of the fur trade? They were getting so much money from fur from the Europeans. That's what Russia was engaged in at that time as well. But after the Second World War, the Russians began to help African countries, especially before independence and after independence, because they realized that they were in a war with the West, and the West was on some global dominion crazy ideology, which we're seeing playing out today. And they realized that the only way they could survive was not to let the West coerce all these other countries into doing what the West wants. So that's why Russia was, if you look at a lot of all those independence struggles in Africa, and even a lot of the early civil wars, you see the Russians backing one side. And this is not the first time a country has had this idea to try and unite the whole world to fight Western civilization, not just the Americans, Western civilization as a whole, Western Europe and the Americans. Because this Western civilization, the ideology of capitalism and neoliberalism is cultural suicide for everybody else. The fact that they can look at your country and say, oh, you guys are not doing LGBT like we are doing it. Oh, human rights violations. They start scrambling for excuses to drop a war on you and start dropping bombs. That's imperialism, aka so they mask it as neoliberalism.
Interesting.
So the first country to do what Russia did in trying to help other countries was Japan before the Second World War. Japan was actually trying to rally, because Japan could not only see the imperialism, but she could see the racism as well. But for some reason, she got involved in the Second World War on Hitler's side. But that's another story.
For another day.
Now, after Japan, then there was Russia trying to actually, there was quite a bit of focus on helping not just African countries, but African countries. And then after Russia, today, now, dare I say it, and a lot of people will disagree. And when I say help, I don't mean, oh, they love us so much, they've really come to, it's still in their interests. China. But this time in partnership with Russia and this BRICS organization they are creating. See, as a Black person, as an African, when I look for hope, the only thing I see as hope is the BRICS. All those AU, AFCTA, African Free Trade, nah. Most of our African leaders, nah. Only that BRICS. But even the BRICS, we have to be careful how we join the BRICS. Which African leader takes us to the BRICS and under what conditions? And then, if someone like Buhari should take Nigeria to the BRICS, I will not trust
He's
that.
out. Thank goodness he's not there.
Or even, well, if I talk now, they say I'm judging. But
No, the reason I said for me, the reason I'm so grateful is that he doesn't seem to be aware of anything that's going. He wasn't aware of anything. That's the excuses that they keep making. So if you have a leader that is not aware of anything and other people are just making decisions on their behalf, that's disaster in
Right.
waiting. Yeah.
Right. So, or if someone like Paul Biya was to take Cameroon to BRICS, even as a non-Cameroonian, I'm not going to support that because I know Paul Biya is like, this guy is a genocidal maniac. I know he's not taking Cameroon to BRICS for Cameroon's interests, other than his interests. But BRICS represents the best chance at freedom for so-called European created African countries.
So-called European created African countries. Hold that
Yes.
thought there. Just hold that thought. The reason I say so is that you're gonna have to explain to us why you say BRICS is the best option we have.
Yes.
I've
Yeah.
taken this read because there is a big J escape to the Dominican Republic. Says big up Starmat and sister, much blessings. But I particularly want to read Charles Odune's comments because I think he made some. It's a long one, but he says, "Good evening, Susan and Starman. Very interesting conversation, guys. However, may I say that I watched that video a few times, and what I observed was a shift from the old ways of doing business. African leaders are beginning to voice the wish of their people and unfair advantages the sorry uh the oh, unfair advantages.
The
my
West
my
stand.
screen just skipped, sorry. The old ways of doing business, African leaders are beginning to voice the wish of their people and the unfair advantages the West stand on whilst dealing with us. Starman, may I let you know that in the past, people like you and I have criticized former leaders for not speaking up. Let me see. For not speaking up. So on this one, you should give them their badges
Not
for
them.
having
Not
the
them.
guts to speak
I'll,
out.
I'll give Ramaphosa and the Kenyan president, two of
Ruto.
them, not all of them. This is what I'm saying. Let's not get hysterical here just because one has spoken up. The rest of us think, oh, they've
Starman, I
all
tell you, it takes
woken up.
audacity. After you just mentioned Magufuli.
Hmm.
It takes audacity to begin to say things that you know that the West don't want to hear African leaders saying.
Hmm.
Do you understand? Because they will come up with all sorts of propaganda. They will smear your name. They will smear an administration. You remember, we know these people, and we're saying it openly because we know it's an open secret, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an open secret. So you must give them some credence because for Ruto, I might not know a lot about all of his politics locally, but as far as the stands just before this meeting, he came out to talk about how Africans no longer need visa to go into Kenya. Now, I know that there was a mention for Africans in the diaspora. I'm not sure how that pans out for continental Africans who live on the continent, who carry passports from different nations. I haven't really investigated that or looked into that to understand what that implies for them. However, it might just be an investment strategy to just attract people who have money, who are Africans, to come into Kenya easily. But it's something that is worth, talking about. So I did say that. Please hold your thought there.
Hmm.
After you've reacted to Charles's comment, you need to then explain why you say BRICS is a better option for us.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I have given credit to Ramaphosa and Ruto. Well, I'm not just going to automatically extend that credit to every other African president. They all have to stand up and be counted one by one. They have to earn the badge of honor. You see, the mistake we're going to make now is just to automatically hand out credits to all of them just because one stood up. Let's not forget that these leaders are, given put in a half desperate situation, losing power, they're ready to kill their own people. Many of them. I'm not saying all of them, but many of them. How many Africans die in their elections, every election, because politicians are fighting for power? You know. So, and then see, the reason I said I see African leaders largely, and they'll have to convince me one by one that either they've changed or that they are not. The reason I see them largely as warrant chief presidents is because what's the best way to say this now? Should I be brutal with it? but it will take a bit of breakdown. The reason I see African leaders as warrant chief presidents is because the thing, anytime I say this, black people attack me. They say, "Oh, why are you putting black people down?" But what I'm saying, I didn't just pull it out the air. It comes from just studying history and just seeing what happened. And personally, what I'm going to say, I think if black people saw themselves like this, through the lens of what I'm going to say, they'll really, really understand their situation on this planet much better. Why did I say warrant chief presidents or prison warder? Well, warrant chief or prison. I call them prison warders or warrant chiefs. Why do I use these terms? I use these terms because I see European created African countries as prison camps. These countries were not created by Africans, they were created by Europeans to work for Europeans, not the Africans. They went against all the natural dynamics of populations in Africa, just to draw in lines anyhow. And this prison camp, why did Europeans create it? Europeans created these prison camps because it was actually at the end of a war where the prisoners who survived the war needed to be kept under control. Now, what war am I talking about? Africans, black people, do not realize that for the past 600 years, Europe has declared war on them. The papal bull of 1492, you should all take time and go and read that and tell me that is not a declaration of war.
What is the what was the papal bull?
The Pope declared to all Europeans who, at this stage, Europe had become Christianized,
Mm-hmm.
he declared to them that they should fight and kill the Saracen, who were the Muslims, who at the time they were engaged in the Crusades with. They were fighting the Crusades lasted for 400 years. Not constant warring, but episodes of, I think, about 11 periods of battle. But it lasted for about 400 years. So that's where the enmity between Christians and Muslims started from. But apart from the Pope declaring to the Christians to make war on the Muslims, he added that they should also make war and reduce the pagans to slavery, seize their lands, and should they refuse to convert to Christianity, enslave them. Seize their lands. What's that? Is that not? How does this not sound like a declaration of war? This is what the Pope declared in 1892. And after this, trans-Saharan slave trade kicked off. You often hear white people always talking about how they won. We won. And when you ask them, we won what? Oh yeah, we conquered everybody. They've even written books about it. How the West won. Why the West won. What's that idiot now? Ferguson and his own book. What's it called? The killer apps that let the West win. Jared Diamond, Guns, Gems, and Steel. They're always coming up with all these stupid reasons why they conquered everybody. Meanwhile, the one reason they never mention is just the vagrant criminality. They'll tell you conquest. Meanwhile, conquest is actually an umbrella of all sorts of crimes against humanity. Killing people, murdering, looting, raping, kidnapping, slaving up. But in their minds, they won. In their minds. Now ask yourself, if someone whose civilization actually has a document, a piece of paper, where they wrote down declaring war on you, they now conquer. They now finish 350 years of conquest. Some of you now survive. Ask yourself what happens. What happens after that? Of course, you're now a prisoner of war to be enslaved. And that's why Berlin Conference happened. Berlin was where they created these prisons for us Africans. And ultimately why I call our presidents the warrant chiefs and the prison warders is because, like I keep calling our countries in Africa, European African countries. So Europeans created these countries that are nothing more than prison camps. Of course, you need prison warders to run these camps. Are we trying to say we don't know how Europe coos up? Once a Lumumba or Nkrumah that they know is not going to go by their wishes comes up, they remove him, coup him up, or instigate civil war, and parachute their own man that they will know will do their bidding. The prison. Ask yourself why African presidents do more, have done, and keep doing more favors for European colonizers than the African people themselves. Ask yourselves why Shell will come, they'll sign all the contracts. But when just an ordinary African boy, it comes up with a bright idea, he has to start. They'll first tell him, finish school first. Go for one scholarship competition. They can't even put together an African company to do our own resource extraction. Everything is, they are just, that's why I said they are there to sign paper. Just once the colonizers come, their job is just to sign off.
That was before. Things are changing now, Starman.
Well, I'm just saying why I use, the descriptions I use: prison warder, presidents, colonial or prison camp countries, European African countries, So yeah, that's so I'm not.
Does that explain why you think that the BRICS is, just to bring your mind back to that? Does that explain why you think the BRICS is better for African nations to be?
Yeah, no, not really. If anything, I think the fact that we still have many unintegrous leaders is the danger to BRICS saving us. But why I think BRICS is the best chance we have to get out from under the foot of the West and G7 is because the G7 has been controlling our lives and destinies for the past 550 years. It doesn't look like any progress. All we know is they keep taking our resources, getting richer and richer and richer, but we're just getting poorer and poorer. Ordinary bridge, they won't even build. Ordinary road, they won't even build. Now, BRICS, and then on top of that, their ultimate instrument of control is the fact that they have their so-called global reserve currency, the dollar, the strongest weapon of the US military, more powerful than their nukes, aircraft. You see that dollar note? People don't realize that that's the most dangerous weapon on the planet. The fact that, why BRICS is important. The fact that the US can use the dollar and threaten you with sanctions as a whole country. Do you know what that means? Let me tell you why I say the dollar is the most dangerous weapon on the planet. Do you know what a medieval siege is? Do you know what a medieval siege is? Like when you lay siege.
Medieval, yes.
Say you invade, you want to take over a king's castle.
Just surround.
Rival king. You surround his castle with your army. Right. And then you lay siege to his castle. And then you try and starve him out because you've now blocked off access into the castle, bringing in supplies, and access from the castle to go get supplies or whatever. You've blocked them off. Many people do not realize that sanctions is the 21st century equivalent of the medieval siege. When they impose sanctions on your country, they've effectively used the dollar. See, they've effectively laid siege to your country. And sanctions is based on the dollar.
That's right.
cut off your access to the dollar, meaning that you can't trade in or out. And the aim of the siege, see, medieval siege, by the end of the siege, yeah, there's hunger in the castle, there's disease, people's spirits are broken. Sanctions have killed more people than even the wars. America, even though America has made more war, I think only Britain has made more war than America in world history. But their sanctions have killed more people than even the wars they've done. Maybe apart from Second World War with the nuclear bombs and all that, you know. But even then, how many people died from nuclear bombs? 200,000. But I'm not rubbishing it, but you know. So now the BRICS, they're talking about, you know, trading based on commodities, gold, silver, and a basket of 20 other commodities that these all countries trying to join BRICS have in abundance. 20 other commodities. That means nobody can sanction you. And as we know, when you control your resources, like Russia does, how would you be so stupid to go sanction the person with the resources you want? It's because of the dollar and because of imperialism, neo-colonialism. That's why we don't control our resources. A lot of Africans, they don't believe in neo-colonialism. When you ask them why, they say, white man has left Africa a long time ago.
Yeah, because they can't see it.
They are no longer a
They're not
problem.
physically present, so they don't understand it.
Yeah.
You literally have to go into university to understand when they teach on the development of Africa.
If you follow a white religion, your brain is being neo-colonized as we speak. If you regurgitate a white curriculum or European curriculum as they taught you in school, you didn't use your own brain to crank through it with your own brain. You just regurgitate. John Locke said this. Adam Smith said this. Your brain.
But you're forced to do so when you're at school. In fact, you can write the most beautiful essays, and then they will mark you down because you haven't referenced.
Yes, exactly.
If you did sociology, if you study sociology, you understand that you have to reference. So you must regurgitate.
Right.
You must regurgitate.
But the fact that they are made to regurgitate, tell you that someone is neo-colonizing you. Someone is imperializing you.
You're absolutely right. But how are we going to get out of it? We don't have a particular system of educating our people on the African continent, just like the Chinese have.
See, okay? Let me even add something just for those who think there's nothing like neo-colonialism. Okay, so, and I think I've said this before. So colonialism is when whoever claims to be your colonizer turns up in your country, he's pointing a gun at your face, and he's telling you what to do. Right. Dig up your gold, put it in a truck.
Literally, robbery.
Drive it to my country. And if you talk too much, or if you guys want to, you shoot one person just to, when that person drops, fear, trauma, you traumatize everybody. The rest of them will calm down, pacify. You know, that's colonialism. It's slavery. What is slavery? Slavery is being forced. Slavery has nothing to do with chain on your neck, as a definition. The simple definition of slavery is being forced to do what you don't want to do, and you can't resist without the threat of violence. Being forced to act without your own agency, that's slavery. From there, you can now start adding whether it's trans-Saharan slave trade, it's colonialism, or even this current neo-colonialism we're going through, which is still a kind of slavery. The fact that you have a whole country who can't freely act unless they get the go-ahead of a former colonizer. I mean, just even ask yourself, what's even the difference between colonialism and neo-colonialism? What's the difference? The only difference is neo. Because even one says colonialism, new style colonialism in it.
It's like just redesigning.
Neo means new.
Yeah.
New colonialism.
Just redesigning, you know.
Now, for those who think they can't see neo-colonialism because they can't see white people, you know, oppressing them, But look around you on the African continent. You can see Shell, right? You can see ExxonMobil. You can see Agip, BP, De Beers, Glencore. You can see all these Western companies, right? Ask yourself, why is it that only Western companies extract African resources? Is it that no Africans knows how to extract resources? Is someone trying to tell me that in the 1400s, Mansa Musa had to go bring Europeans to come dig up all the gold that made him the richest man in history? Really? Many of us do not understand that in Western legal jargon, a company is a legal person. A company legally has the same rights as a person, and in some cases, even more privileges. So you might look at it and think, oh, it's just shell, bricks and mortar. To the white colonizer, that is a legal person doing his bidding.
Right.
That's neo-colonialism.
Thank you for that. That's an interesting way to bring it home. Let me talk about, so that we don't go on for too long. I also watched a video of an ANC leader from South Africa who was being interviewed by this guy, this BBC guy. I can't remember his name now, and he talked about the BBC presenter asked him if Putin was to, attend, visit South Africa, if he was going to be arrested because South Africa is a signatory to the International Criminal Court, you know. And the guy said, which was very interesting, and I wanted to ask, I'm saying this just to ask a question of why you think South Africa is able to stand firmly and is able to make certain statements to the West without fear of repercussions, which is when he said that if they will be so glad to have Putin as soon as that same day, like as soon as today. But then, of course, he says, of course, we are restricted because we are signatory to this ICC. And of course, we understand that. But that's not to say that we will not welcome Putin. And then he went ahead to say that exactly why, which world leader has ever been arrested. And then he cited all of these, Tony Blair and all these people who came up with lies or weapons of mass destructions and caused wars and destroyed nations and have never been arrested. And he was asking, why should it start with Putin? Why should Putin be arrested? Why should it be on South African soil? I just said all of this to say, what gives South Africa? I want to know what gives South Africa the impetus. Why do they seem to be the only African nations who are able to really, really speak up about these things about, Russia's after Russia's invasion to Ukraine? Why are they the only ones able to speak up like that? Because the other African countries, they might reject or stand a certain ground, but they are not vocal.
Mm.
Why do you think South Africa is able to do so?
So, first of all, remember Mandela told the West that, look, just because someone is your enemy doesn't mean he has to be my enemy. Like, what the hell? And they are doing it again. You see, the thing with the West is they are very vindictive. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them no, they will keep coming and they will just grind you down with pressure till you cave in. That's one thing with them. And like I said, they're doing it again. And next thing you know, in fact, apparently they've been now threatening to sanction South Africa because of it. But the South Africans, clearly, you can see they don't care because they understand what BRICS is all about. They understand that the G7 is on the way down. It's over for the G7. South Africa understands where the future lies. And the fact that they call foundational member of the BRICS, I've always wondered why it wasn't Nigeria. But the fact that Nigeria is a failed state should tell you why. That it wasn't Nigeria that was brought into BRICS.
So
And it
now
was,
talking about the BRICS, I believe
mm,
India is part of the BRICS, isn't it? It's the
yeah,
I BRICS.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, you can see lately Even the Indian Prime Minister, is it Modi,
Yeah.
has visited the US. And Kamala Harris has used her position as a woman. During the elections, they told stories and made her identify as though she was African American. And people were having this argument about her not being African American, but she's Indian. But of
Yeah.
course, because for the purpose of winning the black vote, they portrayed her as though she's African American, isn't it? And then
Yeah.
she goes on to talk about the stories of her memories of visiting India, how her mother or her grandmother made sure that they visited India very often, and to so that they know where they come from, where her people come from. Because as I watch, all I could see is that game, and I know I'm not the smartest person in the world. So if I can see it, everyone else, most people can see it. The game of now alluring India into this thing because they can see that India still is on the fence and will not go against condemning Russia's actions in invading Ukraine. So then they come up with all of these stories, and this is the level, the leg they use. In those days, when they do it for continental Africans, by the time they praise you, one praise, or they come and speak one small pidgin, like Macron does when he comes to
Yeah.
Nigeria. He speaks pidgin English. He goes to the shrine, and then people just, oh, he's speaking pidgin, and it's so easy to get us. I'm
Yeah.
looking at how this pans out because, of course, India is a foundational member of the BRICS. And whatever happens, whatever decisions India makes, end up affecting South Africa. South Africa's stance and decisions.
Yes. I mean, right now, those five core BRIC nations, I think they really understand what they are fighting for. If anything, I actually see India as the weakest link because now I don't know whether to put the weakest link tag being something that's coming from them or the fact that the Americans are trying to use their historical ties to try and bully or coerce them into breaking from the BRICS. If you notice, they're also pushing this narrative. Oh, the BRICS won't work because China and India are at war with each other because of border issues. They keep pushing it. But ultimately, I think India knows which side her bread is buttered on.
And I think India should be smart enough to understand that at the end
Or
of the day, if you fall
or
so
which
easily
side of the
when
bread.
they've got what they want, you're going to have to deal with all of the shenanigans that come with it when they have gotten you where they want to get you, isn't
Right.
it?
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, the G7, in fact, there's this graph that's been going around that shows the BRICS nations. In the 80s, they were like something like I can't remember the figures now. They were something like their GDP was something like 10% of the world, while the GDP of the BRICS nations was like 56%.
Hmm.
And then by 2017, the GDP of the BRICS nations was like 16%, and the BRICS nations was like I think it was like 34% or something like that. So you can see from the 80s, yeah, the graph. This is the BRICS nations from the bottom. This is the G7 from the top.
Mm-hmm.
From the 80s, they were on 10. G7 was on 56. 2017, they'd gone up a bit to 16. G7 had dropped to 30 something. As of this year, the G7, their GDP has gone up. The BRICS has, for the first time, gone below. And look, this is not reversible. The fact is, China is growing, and some of the members of these BRICS not only have some of the most resource-rich countries, they also have the largest populations around on the planet, complete with China having the largest industrial base, which is the real wealth industry. That's why Africa is not going anywhere. As long as you don't see any industry in Africa,
That's right.
you forget. See, there's a reason why the West kept us deindustrialized. Because once we industrialize, we will now become competition for them over our own resources. And because those resources are on our land, then there's no guarantee them getting it anymore. So the only way to guarantee they get those resources is to keep us the industry. Look, There was a German that spent
Sorry,
15
when you talk about resources, it's not just the natural resources, it's also the human resources, like
everything.
literally, because Europe, America, all of these Western nations need the migration from countries that are struggling economically. As
Yes.
much as they try to close their borders, they need the labor, the manpower from these countries to be able to function. So if
See,
you find yourself in a country that is working in Africa, why would you want to cross seas or
what
even
what
get
you've
planes
described,
to want to
what
leave
you just
abroad?
described, what you just described, I call it the brain drain of Africa. And this
Mm.
brain drain started since the slave trade. Remember when you are raiding for slaves, you're not going to capture babies. You're not going to capture old men and women. Well, what do you need an old man and woman to work on the plantation for? You're capturing the youngest, healthiest, strongest ones and ferrying them to go and do slave work. They've been brain draining us for the past, see, in fact, not even just the Western Europeans, the Arabs, past 1,000 years. When I say Africans were the victims of the longest war in human history, 1,000 years,
Mm.
1,050 years, people think, oh, Starman, you like, oh, alarmism.
Tama,
You're
we're going to be ending this broadcast in about 4 minutes. Four
okay.
minutes. So let's try and do. I know with you, it's always we can never stream. I know part of today's problem is not yours because literally almost 30 minutes was trying to play that video that was lagging. And Soji says, where's everyone? Everyone was here and they're still here, some on Facebook. And we had a bit of a slow start. And so basically, in the last few minutes, Starman, we have to do a proper one where we go and watch those videos so that the next time we're talking about things, we're talking with a little more information.
Yeah, right.
I literally ran, I was stuck on the road because some spoiled kids here in London decided to pull the fire bell at the train station, the fire alarm at the train station. So I'm about to get into the train station and they stopped everyone because they needed to stop, even though there was no fire. You know, British kids
Mm,
are something else, you
yeah.
know. And so I was running like a headless chicken, didn't have the time to spend time to watch the entire video fully so that I could have educated you at least even though the video was lagging so that we have a conversation that is more in depth. However, it's not been a wasted broadcast, I tell you, because you've come up with a lot of information that is, very educative and insightful. It's something worth um, you know, researching. So you go ahead and just talk about give your last general thoughts on
Okay.
our conversation for
See,
today.
okay, there's something I keep trying to make Africans realize, and that is that resources run out. Just because they've discovered gold in location X doesn't mean there'll be gold in location X forever. One day that gold will run out. And today you see the scramble for not just resources in gold, but a renewed gold rush centered in Africa. Yeah. Why? Because, like I said, resources run out. They've strip mined all the gold in North America, South America, and Australia. The only places now you can find gold in abundance is Papua New Guinea, where they've already leveled the whole mountain because that mountain was actually the one of the I think the largest ever deposit of gold, silver, and copper ever discovered. They've reduced that mountain to nothing, and now they're tearing down the second mountain. And then now they're in Africa as well. Remember Uganda? They just discovered $13 billion worth or trillion or something like that worth of gold. The day I heard that announcement, I held my head. I was like, "Oh my God! There's gonna be a war in Uganda soon. They are going to come for them soon." Next thing I know, they start chasing Museveni up and down for LGBTQ, all because they want to try and pin something human rights on him. Remember,
Mhm.
Mugabe, Gaddafi, Saddam. They always pin human rights on them.
Mm.
It's a starting point. They'll pin human rights on him, cook up some shit. They're in Uganda now, for either instigating or fighting a war,
And
all
there-
because of that gold.
and there's always somebody on the inside that is going to be compromised because until they break inside, they can never succeed. Just like what could have happened in Russia, isn't it?
Right. See, Nigeria, as we speak, the
Soji
middle belt
says,
of Nigeria, uh,
Soji from YouTube says 20 trillion tons.
right, thank you. 20 trillion tons. That's even more than the 13 trillion I'm talking about. Jesus. That's more than the $13 trillion I'm talking about. No, man. See, we cannot have a world, yeah, with criminal nations, nations that got rich off criminality, who know that this gold exists, and they will not be plotting to get it unless we're fooling ourselves. Look at Nigeria. Nigeria discovered enough gold to compete with South Africa. As we speak, terrorists have ravaged the area where the gold is, but we know that there's
Lifting it.
foreigners
Yeah.
mining gold, not being bothered by the terrorists.
Guess what? And that gold is not coming back to the economy of Nigeria. It's not even Nigerian government have not yet even recognized gold as a natural resource that is in abundance in Nigeria.
Do you know the question I've been asking? Do you know the question I've been asking everybody? Or I've been asking all so-called Nigerians. Can you guys see how every central bank in the world is scrambling, buying up gold? All of them are buying because everybody knows the dollar is going to collapse. And the only way to hedge against that collapse is to buy gold. I've been asking every single Nigerian, since we discovered gold in the middle belt of Nigeria, does the CBN have gold stock reserves?
Mm-hmm.
Does it? And nobody has answered me this question till now. And we want to join BRICS. Meanwhile, all the BRICS nations, they are all hoarding gold. Now, like I said, resources run out. A lot of I saw a chart where about 12 or 15 of the world's most strategic resources will start running out from 2035. Gold, silver, crude oil, uranium, many of these things by 2035 will start running out. If the Africans do not rise up and take charge of their destiny, don't ever expect the West to leave. They will only leave when they've pumped out the last drop of crude oil, extracted the last nugget of gold and silver. And after that, we will remain forever underdeveloped. And that's even if they leave at all, because as we know, they're also buying up massive amounts of the best farmland across Africa. And
that brings me to want to talk about Bill Gates' visit to Nigeria to President Tinubu.
Right.
Okay. But I know this conversation is not going to end. You know what, Starman? We need to reschedule.
Yeah.
We need to reschedule and continue from where we stopped. But there's so much to talk about and highlight so that people can begin to understand. I am very troubled. And what's this African American guy? I saw a video where he was talking about how the GMO foods is even something of the past now, and he did mention something about a new technology they're going to be using. Okay, because GMO even destroys the land. You can never reuse the land again. So they have come up with something else. What troubles me with Bill Gates' visit is the fact that the one thing we've had as Africans is our natural foods, our land. No matter what happens, the fact that we're able to find our food from the ground and use it, our medicines. So if they do infiltrate through Bill Gates and get to the point where um they mess up the land, they mess up the foods, then Africans have this themselves to blame for it. Because you know why? We don't even have the sort of medical facilities to deal with the sort of illnesses, sicknesses, and diseases that will surely come up sometime in the future. The one thing that has stood up for us is the fact that, we are blessed with vitamin D from the abundance of the sun that is available in Africa, our foods, our natural foods, because we think we're poor, especially because we're not driving big cars, we're not living air conditioned homes. Little did we know that we're the ones even lucky not to be.
Let me tell you something about we thinking we're poor. The African, especially those of us in diaspora, collecting mortgage, paying 25-year mortgage, Meanwhile, you have ancestral land. Are you mad? Ancestral land. Why is Bill Gates trying to buy your ancestral land? Ask yourself that. Yeah, you are one of the few population on this planet that's still connected to his ancestral land, that can still live in such a way that you don't have to pay no man mortgage. But today we've allowed our federal governments that were created from the legacy of the Berlin Conference
Mm.
seize all our land just so that we can run to diaspora and go and collect a mortgage and be paying another man mortgage for 35 years in his country. This is why we're poor, because we've been disconnected from our a people with an ancestral land cannot be poor. They cannot be poor. Especially not like how you know how it is in our part of Nigeria. You know how we hand down land to our family.
That's right. It's cultural.
And
It's
the land is the primary means of production.
everywhere.
We being poor is because the federal government now controls everybody's land, and we're now running to diaspora to go and work, moving to big cities to go and work and pay rent.
Stama, let's do this next week.
Mhm.
Let's do this next week. Let's talk about it. Soji says, yep, Katsina Gold. Apparently, all Arabs know the difference between Katsina Gold and any other. Yeah, I do hear that it is highly priced.
Thank you,
Highly
Soji.
priced.
Thank you.
Yet,
See,
yet the Nigerian government have not even acknowledged that because they don't want to bring that money back in because they're making money through the back door with foreigners. And Soji says, when are you rescheduling? Soji,
oh,
we're going to reschedule to next week, Sunday.
is the foreigners making the money and
Yeah.
then bribing the people who control the land?
All right. And Vince says, Arise Africa. That's right. Absolutely. And Soji is also making a correction. He says it's not 20 trillion, but 12 trillion. You were correct. It's apparently 12 trillion. So Starman, you were right on that one. Yeah. So let's go and come back next week, Sunday. In fact, what I've decided to do is I'm gonna do what they call a streamathon, but I'm not looking forward to entering the Guinness books of records. I'm not contacting Guinness, but I have so much to talk about, and I am so engaged during the week that it's becoming a struggle. But there's so much we need to talk about, and I love the fact that we come here, we learn a thing or two, and people's minds and eyes are opening. Because even if it's just one thing somebody picks up from here, they go and research it. They are better educated than they were before they joined the stream. Okay, so there is no time wasted. So what we're going to do next week is a streamathon. Literally, we might have even more than 3 sessions with different guests. So just keep it locked here for next week, Sunday. We're definitely coming on. You never know, probably come on in the afternoon and stream all the way into the night, okay? Because there's so much to talk about. Because Starman literally needs 24 hours. You need 24 hours for Starman to make a point and continue. So, yes, Starman, next week is party time for you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. When you see the kind of things I've seen,
Yeah.
you just can't hold it
I
in.
trust you. And
Mm.
Charles says those were the things Peter Obi wanted to put a stop to. Of course, that's why they would let him. But definitely, let's see how it goes. And Soji says, "Okay, I shall be with you. This is a good time, so please do let me know. Wonderful as Africa must rise." Absolutely, the abuse of our resources. Charles Odineye says, "Starman, make sure you keep Starman. Like seriously, today." There was so much that went on. You were struggling to come on stream. I was stuck on the road, even though I left in good time because of some spoiled kids that decided to play prank and stop everyone from traveling. And I couldn't play the video, but guess what? We're going to be better prepared for next week, Sunday. We're going to be starting early next week. We're going to be starting early. Okay, we're going to talk about different, very varied issues. So some people might just want to carry a pen and paper because Starman is always coming up with a lot of information that even I go, oh, okay, I have not heard of that one, or I didn't know that, so that we can go and also research these things for ourselves. Okay. All right, Starman, catch you next week. And Soji, keep it locked here. I'm going to schedule the broadcast. So once you see it, make sure that you are ready. It's going to be a streamathon next week, Sunday. All right. All right. Thank you,
All right,
Starman.
folks. Take care. Thank you,
Thanks.
Susan. See you next week again.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll catch you on the other side.
All right.
And for all of you watching on Facebook and YouTube, please make sure, do well to subscribe, do well to follow, do well to like, do well to comment. And yes, I'll see you next time. It's Africa Rice TV on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I love you all and see you next week, Sunday. Bye bye and God bless.